James Rodriguez had been mopping the same hallway of the Galactic Embassy for 3 hours when he heard the commotion. Not that heard was the right word. The Vexarii communicated through bioluminescent patterns on their skin, so their arguments looked like fireworks displays. He checked his watch. 3 p.m. The twins would be out of school soon. "Excuse me," he said to the cluster of agitated diplomats blocking his cart. They ignored him, as usual. Humans were recent additions to the galactic community, barely 20 years since first contact, and janitors were invisible in every culture, apparently. James had learned to be okay with invisible. Invisible meant he could leave exactly at 3:15 to pick up Arya and Silas from the special education center 3 blocks away. Invisible meant steady pay and health insurance that covered his kids' medical appointments, even if those appointments were with doctors still learning how to treat hybrid human Vexarii children. The twins' mother, Lyrisol, a Vexarii engineer, had died 2 years ago in a ship accident. Before the other Vexarii could take the children back where they belonged, James had filed every legal document human and galactic law allowed. The courts had ruled in his favor, barely. Hybrid children were rare, and the legal precedents were still being written. At 3:15 exactly, James clocked out and hurried to the school. Arya and Silas waited by their usual spot, their skin flickering in the muted patterns that meant contentment. Both 8-year-olds had their mother's bioluminescent skin and facial structure, but James's dark eyes and his disaster of curly hair. They were also profoundly deaf, a rare condition that affected the few Vexarii human hybrids in existence. The Vexarii relied entirely on visual communication, but the children couldn't process the rapid light patterns their mother's people used, and they couldn't hear spoken language either. So James had learned sign language. Then he'd invented new signs. 4 Vexarii concepts that didn't exist in ASL. Then he taught the twins to read and write in both English and Vexarii script. It had taken 2 years of every spare moment, countless tutorial videos, and help from 3 different online communities. "How is school?" he signed. "Mrs. Patterson says I'm getting better at math." Arya's hands moved quickly. But Silas got in trouble for flickering Morse code during quiet time. Silas flickered his skin in a pattern James had learned meant unrepentant mischief. They walked home, a tiny apartment near the embassy, and James started dinner while the twins did homework. He just put the rice on when someone knocked. Not the door chime, an actual knock, which meant someone who didn't know human customs. James opened the door and immediately tried not to panic. Queen Solivex stood in his hallway, her skin rippling with formal patterns that his translator earpiece rendered as requesting entrance. Her 4 royal guards filled the narrow corridor, and somewhere behind them, James could hear his neighbors' doors opening and closing as people either gawked or hid. "Your Majesty," James managed, stepping aside. "Please come in." The queen entered, her tall frame barely fitting through the doorway. Her skin flickered rapidly, taking in the apartment's modest furnishings, the children's artwork on the walls, the Vexarii grammar guides stacked on every surface. Arya and Silas had frozen at the kitchen table, their skin pale with fear. The queen's skin asked a question. "Why have you stolen our children?" James felt something fierce ignite in his chest. "They're my children." The courts agreed. The courts do not understand. These children cannot communicate as Vexarii. They are lost to us. They should be in proper care facilities where... Where what? James interrupted, knowing it was probably treason. Well, they could be isolated and studied. Lyra didn't want that. We wanted them to have a family. The queen's skin patterns shifted to something his translator couldn't interpret. She moved toward the twins, and James instinctively stepped between them. Then Silas did something that changed everything. He began to flicker his skin, not in traditional Vexarii patterns, but in something new. Short bursts and long bursts. Morse code, but made of light instead of sound. And next to each light pattern, he signed with his hands, creating a bridge between both languages. "Hello, grandmother," the patterns and signs said. "We are not lost. We are learning both ways." Arya joined him, her skin and hands moving in synchronization. "Dad taught us." He says we can be both, human and Vex REI. We don't have to choose. The queen stood motionless for a long moment. Then her skin erupted in a pattern so complex that James's translator gave up, displaying only profound emotional response. Untranslatable. She turned to James. You created a new language. I created a way for my kids to talk to both sides of their family, James corrected. And yeah, it took 2 years and about 1 million failed attempts, but the queen's skin shifted to pure, radiant gold, the Vex REI expression of deepest respect. I came here to assess whether the children were being neglected. Instead, I find they have been given something no Vex REI facility could provide. She paused. A father who refused to let them be divided. She knelt before the twins, her skin asking, "Will you teach me?" Silas and Arya looked at each other, then at James. He nodded. It's called light sign. Arya's hands and skin moved together. And yes, we'll teach you, but you have to practice every day. Dad says that's the only way to get good at anything. The queen's skin rippled with what James had learned was Vex REI laughter. 6 months later, light sign became the official communication method for all hybrid children in the galaxy. James Rodriguez, Janitor, was awarded the Galactic Medal of Cultural Innovation. He kept mopping floors at the embassy. It still paid well, the hours were still good, and invisible suited him just fine. But now, when diplomats passed him in the halls, their skin flickered a greeting in light sign. And James always signed back.